Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Phil with the Movies. I'm your host, Phil Walsh, and this is episode number 107 of this ongoing show that is always for the love of movies. I want to thank you for tuning in and hearing what I have to say on all things movies related. Or if you're watching on YouTube, welcome back. Quick show for you today. Wanted to review a film that actually came out back in March, but I never had a chance to properly review it here on the show. And now that it is available for streaming and actually, I shouldn't say streaming, but it is available to rent digitally, I thought now would be a good time to talk about it. It is certainly a film that has generated a lot of discussion and chatter, particularly in movie-going circles. It is a horror film, so keeping it in the familiar wheelhouse, if you will. And the film is Immaculate, starring Sydney Sweeney. And normally, I have to say, I am not a fan of religious themed horror films. Movies like The Exorcist, The Omen, Rosemary's Baby. Those are films that I tend to usually stay away from. I'm just not a fan of that particular subgenre of horror. Everyone who listens to the show and certainly would know me knows my cup of tea is the slashers, films like Halloween, Pearl, or anything a psychological horror, even throw in the classics like Dracula. But this one made me take notice. One, Sydney Sweeney is in it, and she seems to be having a well-earned and deserved moment, and certainly has garnered a lot of success with films like Anyone But You, and now with Immaculate. And so that made me sit up and pay attention. And then the subject matter, while not usually something in my wheelhouse, I figured, well, let's give it a go. And I have to say, it surprised me how much I enjoyed this film, given that that subgenre is not usually one that I find myself going to see. But this one, I have to say, it's very unsettling. The movie has a tone and a feeling to it that is ominous throughout, but yet it's such a well-written and fast-paced story that it kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat, and there's not a lot of downtime as often is the case with these types of movies. There's not a lot of exposition or sort of tedious subplots. It really gets right to the point at the very beginning. So the plot of the movie, just to recap it, and yes, there will be some spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film, this be a chance to either unplug or step away from the show for the time being. But the setup for the film involves a nun named Cecilia who's set to go and live in a convent over in Italy, and she's preparing to take her vows. And the convent is beautiful. It's set in the Italian countryside, and all seems to be going well until strange things begin happening to her, and through what appears to be immaculate conception, she discovers that she is carrying a child. She's pregnant. And while it starts off as a very upbeat and certainly positive event that everyone in the convent welcomes with open arms, she soon begins to discover there's something nefarious going on, and that this pregnancy may not be as miraculous as everyone makes it out to be. The film itself really prides it on being a Sydney Sweeney vehicle. She carries this film from beginning to end, and she is flawless in it. She has a vulnerability to her in her performance early on that really draws the audience in, and we're with her. We're on this journey with her from start to finish, and yet she has a wonderful arc where she comes into her own, and she becomes, frankly, quite a badass in some ways by the end of the film, and she's really fighting for her life. She's fighting for her survival and sort of calling out this twisted, malicious hypocrisy of the church, and ultimately making a stand to try and save her life and get out from this convent, which is almost like a cult, if you will. The film, as I mentioned, has a quick pace. It's only about an hour and a half, and there's not an ounce of fat on this film. I might have liked a little bit more of a story. Sort of, talking up both sides of my face about exposition and subplots, but I would have liked maybe a little bit more background on Cecilia and what sort of brought her to the convent. But other than that, it's not enough to derail the film or take away from it. Again, the film has a creepy vibe to it that, again, I felt myself being, sort of looking over my shoulder and sitting on the edge of my seat, and it's visceral. The film is not for squeamish individuals. So if you're not a fan of anything bloody or sort of gross and sort of stomach churning, you may want to stay away from it because there are a few scenes and moments in the film where I sort of felt myself having a visceral reaction to it, but yet it's never over the top. It's never sort of excessive or in your face. It's just the right amount of horror and sort of stomach churning moments to kind of keep with the pace of it. But again, the film plays like a roller coaster. Once she discovers there's a nefarious plot underway with regards to her immaculate conception, if you will, the film just plays straight through it. You are on a one bending twist after the other. And there's a great moment near the end where she finds herself in the catacombs underneath the convent. And I mean, it's suspenseful, it's twisting, it's a lot of things that we've seen before in similar movies, but yet they found a way to make it feel fresh and frankly relevant. There's actually a very interesting commentary going on in this film, sort of with all the headlines and news today as it relates to reproductive rights and a woman's right to choose. That is sort of laced throughout the film. And again, it's never preachy in a way. I mean, this is not a political film necessarily, but there's a lot of interesting sort of similarities or callbacks, if you will, to what's actually going on in day-to-day society. So I always like when horror can sort of offer a viewpoint on what's happening in the world today and kind of shine a spotlight on it that makes it feel relevant. And that's something only horror can do because often is the case in a drama or another type of movie, it can feel a little preachy or too political. And this is that perfect balance. But the film itself is suspenseful. There's a beautiful look to the film. I mean, even amid all of the sort of gothic nature and unsettling images, the film is set in the beautiful, picturesque Italian countryside. And that's a nice juxtaposition against all the horror and mayhem that is going on. And just from a visual standpoint, it's beautiful to watch. And then there's a really creepy and ominous score that plays throughout the film. And that's almost like a character in and of itself. But I have to really give props where props are due. And Sydney Sweeney really carries this film. This is her vehicle, and she is unstoppable in this film. And like I said, you're with her the entire ride. And I like how this film goes against sort of the convention in these types of movies where you either find the protagonist either caught up in a convoluted twist or they end up not making it out of the film alive. And she does make it out by the end of this film. And the ending itself certainly is going to leave people talking. And it is quite an ending. It is visceral. It is sort of gobsmacking, but yet it is so fitting with the story that's being told, and it's strangely cathartic in a lot of ways. I found myself sort of being in shock when the credits started to roll. I was like, wow, they actually went there, and I'm not going to spoil it because this is one of those situations where I think you have to see that ending in order to really appreciate its effectiveness. It's one of the strongest endings I've seen in a horror film in recent times. So the movie is immaculate. I would highly recommend it. It's not a movie that I generally go to see because I prefer either a psychological horror or a traditional slasher. But Sydney Sweeney won me over in this film, and she is dynamite. She really knows how to play to the strengths of a horror film without sort of going overboard as a lot of actors will do with a role like this. This is a situation where it could become almost melodramatic or sort of borderline campy, and she finds a way to sort of keep it real, to keep it working, and delivers a frankly terrifying performance. And just from like a scream queen aspect, I certainly mentioned a lot of that of those roles on the show. She really delivers quite a visceral moment where, I mean, just from a literal scream queen perspective, it's one for the books. But just the performance itself is immaculate, and the film itself is frankly terrifying, disturbing, and pardon the expression, but wonderfully blasphemous. And I think that's a perfect way to sum up my feelings on the movie Immaculate. So I encourage you to go check it out. It's available now to rent or buy digitally, and I'm sure it'll be available for a physical media purchase sometime later this spring. I know I will be picking up a copy of it, get on my little soapbox and preach about physical media at another point. But I think certainly that says it all right there, that I will be picking up a copy of this film to have for my collection and certainly revisit around spooky season later this year. But the movie is immaculate. Let me know your thoughts. Have you seen it? What are your thoughts on that ending? What did you think of Sydney Sweeney's performance and the movie overall? But drop a comment, drop a like, certainly subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you are listening on any of the podcasting platforms, rate and review, give a follow, and of course share this with your family, your friends, anybody who you think might enjoy listening to a fellow movie buff go on, perhaps too long, about his love of movies. But that's all that I have for you today. As promised, would be a quick show, but that does it. I'll be back next week, and we will certainly do this all over again for the love of movies.